good. Wing it, eh? Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Intro. Yeah. Sounds good.
Hello, and welcome to Speaker Series. My name is Scott Wolf, and I'll be your host tonight. I'm joined today by Brad Harker, who's a registered psychologist and a bishop of the Tuscany Ward of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Really happy to have Brad here tonight. Brad has more than 30 years' experience as a registered psychologist, and I'm looking forward to hearing from him. Happy that you've taken the time to join us this evening. I can commend Brad Harker and his message to you. Brad is a friend of mine and a mentor, and I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say. Well, Bishop Harker, how are you tonight?
Doing well. Thank you, Scott.
All right. Well, without any further introduction, I'd like to turn it over to you for your presentation on strengthening relationships.
Okay, thank you. What a pleasure it is to be with each of you in your own homes and to be able to discuss some principles tonight related to building healthy relationships. As the title of the presentation suggests, relationships can be challenging. And as I was reviewing with my wife, Shelley, what I was going to talk about tonight and talking specifically about some of the behaviors that might be harmful in relationships, she sheepishly commented, I'm struggling as I find myself doing what you're recommending that people shouldn't do, and they should try to avoid in relationships. So I acknowledged back to her that I also engage in some of the hurtful behaviors that we'll talk about tonight. The reality is that we all do things in our relationships, particularly in our families, that we regret until we become aware that we're doing that, and until we make concerted efforts to try to change. How important then is it to really seek to understand and become aware of what does and doesn't contribute to healthy relationships? So let me share with you what drew me into my profession as a psychologist. I was very interested in human behavior. It's kept me fully engaged my whole career, as I just love to learn about people and about why they do what they do. But what I've particularly shown an interest in throughout most of my career is wanting to learn how to better help people to strengthen their marriages, strengthen their families, and relationships in general. So a lot of my motivation really comes from the belief that healthy individuals, marriages, and families are the foundation of a safe and productive society. As a registered psychologist, I recognize that my experience in some ways qualifies me to talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. But I really think that what helps me to speak with some confidence is that I've been a husband, I've been a father, I've been a student, a brother, a child, a friend, an employee, a manager, a bishop, and a psychologist. And all of these have taught me something about building healthy and resilient relationships. So with that introduction, let's dive into the topic of today's presentation. And let me note that although at times I'll be making reference to marital relationships, almost all of the principles that we will discuss will be applicable to all of your relationships. So relationships can be challenging. Let's talk about building healthy and resilient relationships. So I grew up in what is referred to as a blended family. And my mother died when I was 9 years old. And about 4 years later, my father, Robert, or Bob, the parent of 4 children, got remarried to Joyce, who was the mother of 2 children. And a year later, along came another child, and she's one of my 3 favorite sisters, Barbara Jean. And I want to say that my stepmother, contrary to what some experience with their step-parent, was a wonderful person. And she did her very best to try to parent as fairly as she could. Now, that does not mean that we didn't have challenges as a family. I've been married to my beautiful wife, Shelley, for over 30 years, and she's the love of my life. We have a strong, committed, and loving marriage and have created many fond memories as we've raised our 3 children. The past few years, we've added 2 son-in-laws and a grandchild, Ruby. And as a family, we really enjoy being together. And even though we enjoy that and we generally get along, there's still challenges to deal with in our family. There's still challenges that I deal with in my marriage. And we always have things to work on. So relationships are challenging, that is true. But they have the potential more than anything else to bring joy, satisfaction, richness into our lives as we learn and apply principles that can lead to happy and successful marital and family relationships. It's also true that when principles of healthy relationships are not applied, that relationships have the potential to be hurtful, destructive, confusing, and sometimes even alienating. So tonight, my hope is to present to you 3 relationship building principles that not only lead to lasting, but also loving relationships. So we're going to talk about avoiding destructive reactions to conflict, building and strengthening love, and developing resilient relationships. And I want to promise you, if you apply these principles, you can have the type of relationships that you desire. And you can experience the love and connection that each of us long for. I'll spend most of my time on that first topic, avoiding destructive reactions to conflict. So let's get into that. And I'll just say that conflict is never enjoyable, but it is a myth that conflict needs to be eliminated in relationships because it is inevitable. Rather, it is really how we deal with conflict that determines the direction of our relationships. Many of you are aware of the researchers and practitioners John and Julie Gottman, and they're world-renowned. They have a marital lab in Seattle, Washington, and they invite couples to come and share a weekend with them and they can learn all sorts of things about their marriage to improve their relationship. And the only stipulation for those couples is that they agree to be videotaped the whole time. So they're videotaped from the moment they arrive till they leave. Now, of course, there is a bit of privacy in their own private residence, but most of the residence is also videotaped. So from these observations in this marital lab, if you will, the Gottmans have identified 4 major behaviors that are destructive or hurtful in relationships. And they refer to them as the 4 horsemen of the marital apocalypse. So these 4 behaviors are destructive to relationships. And if any of these behaviors are present in your current relationships or family interactions, I hope that you'll start to address them. We may be unaware that we communicate and behave in hurtful and destructive ways. And even if we are aware, we may not know how to control those behaviors or how to replace them with healthier communication and behavior. So we're going to look at those 4 harmful behaviors, and then I'll share some ideas to help you stop communicating in that way, if that's what you're doing, and also some ideas about how to communicate and behave in ways to strengthen all of your relationships. These helpful ideas are called antidotes, or in other words, they can cure or are the remedy for the problem. Much of the material on the 4 horsemen of the marital apocalypse can be found on the Gottman Institute webpage, and particularly in an article by Ellie Letizia. So as I alluded to earlier, it is possible that you do some or many of these behaviors. This is normal. A realistic goal is to try to do them less often and seek over time to eliminate them from your typical interactions. Later, I will address ways that we can seek to make relationship repairs when we hurt a loved one through insensitivity, either in communication or behavior. So first of all, let's identify criticism as the first destructive behavior. Criticism is attacking the character of another person instead of focusing on a specific behavior. Letizia shares this example of criticism. You never think about how your behavior is affecting other people. I don't believe you are that forgetful. You're just selfish. You never think of others. You never think of me. So notice the all or none word of never and the label of being selfish. Saying someone is selfish or labeling others is an attack on that person's character. It is much better to just describe unwanted behavior. So the antidote to criticism is to use gentle startups. One way to use a gentle startup is to talk about your feelings using I statements, beginning with I feel and then expressing an emotion and then expressing a positive need. Let me share with you an example of a antidote or a gentle startup to criticism. I was really scared when you were running late and you didn't call me. I was worried something happened to you. I thought we had agreed that we would call if we were going to be late. Now notice how this is a gentler way of addressing the problem. It's hard to be mad at someone for expressing what they feel and expressing their care and concern. Also note that a behavior was addressed instead of attacking the person's character. The outcome for your relationship really couldn't be more different. Criticism puts the other person on the defensive. When someone is attacked with criticism, it may put them into a defensive mode or into fight or flight or freeze mode. And in these modes, we don't think clearly. Our heart rate speeds up and we end up attacking back oftentimes. And then things escalate, and then we're more likely to say things that we regret or that are hurtful. And it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle. If you find that you get into the critical mode, don't worry that your relationship is doomed to fail. But be concerned if you don't try to stop being critical, as that paves the way to get into some of the more destructive behaviors. So the next destructive behavior is referred to as defensiveness. And defensiveness is described by the Gottmans as self-protection through righteous indignation or playing the victim. It typically arises in response to criticism. Defensiveness never solves the problem, and often it's just an underhanded way of blaming your partner. If we don't feel that our partner is being fair in their complaint, we may defensively try to make excuses or attack back. Those strategies almost never work. When we make excuses, it may communicate to our loved ones that we don't take their concerns seriously, that we're blaming them, and that we aren't willing to take responsibility for our mistakes. Let's look at an example of defensiveness from Letizia. Did you call Thomas and Rachel to let them know that we're not coming tonight as you promised this morning? Defensive response. I was just too darn busy today. As a matter of fact, you know how busy my schedule was. Why didn't you just do it? Now let's look at a better response. Here's a non-defensive response. Oops, I forgot. I should have asked you this morning to do it because I knew my day would be packed. That's my fault. Let me call them right now. As you can see, the non-defensive response is an example of the antidote to defensiveness. And that is to accept responsibility or take responsibility for your part of the problem and for the behavior. Scott Peck, a well-known, actually he's an MD. I think he's also a psychologist, but not sure about that. But he's the author of the book, The Road Less Traveled. Here's what he says. He says, whenever we seek to avoid the responsibility for our own behavior, we do so by attempting to give that responsibility to the other individual or organization or entity. But this means that we give away our power to that identity. So defensiveness tends to only escalate conflict. It is the critical, if the critical spouse or family member does not back down or apologize. As discussed previously, defensiveness is really just a way of blaming your loved one, and it doesn't lead to healthy conflict management. So let me share a few of my favorite tips from Gottman on overcoming defensiveness. Actually, just one. At this point, I'm going to talk about looking for the longing. And this is the recognition that behind every complaint is the longing for some need to be met. So think about that. When someone is being critical of you, oftentimes they're just wanting to feel connected to you, to be understood, to feel like they're a priority, that they're important to you, and they want to just be heard and listened to and validated. And if we can see that longing behind the criticism or the complaint, then I think it's a lot easier for us to take responsibility for our own part. I encourage you to develop the belief that we can't expect other people to change to make us happy. Our happiness is dependent on how we live our lives and treat those around us. We're responsible for our own behavior. Now, the third behavior that is destructive to relationships is contempt. And contempt is an expression of superiority that may manifest as sarcasm, cynicism, name-calling, eye-rolling, sneering, mockery, and hostile humor. When we communicate in this manner, we're just being mean. The target of your contempt, if that is how you're treating your loved one, is often made to feel despised and worthless. Let me share with you from Letizia an example of contempt. Now, before I do, I'm sorry if it's hurtful for you to hear how some people speak to their partner or loved ones. They may not be fully aware of that and may not know, though, how hurtful it can be to talk this way. You're tired. Well, cry me a river. I've been with the kids all day, running around like mad to keep this house going, and all you do when you come home from work is flop down on that sofa like a child and play those idiotic video games. I don't have time to deal with another kid. Could you be any more pathetic? Now, this is a contemptuous example of a woman talking to her husband. Now, this is an example of how a husband might talk in a contemptuous way to his wife. You're all about your feelings. You think I don't have feelings? Well, think about someone else for once. If you were half as strong as me, you wouldn't always be needing. It's too much. I just can't take it anymore. So the Gottmans warn that contempt is the greatest predictor of relationship failure or divorce. And it's important that it be eliminated, or we work on eliminating it to preserve our relationships. Contempt is fueled by long simmering negative thoughts about your partner, which come to a head when the contemptuous partner attacks the accused from a position of relative superiority. If it's your goal, which I really don't believe is anyone's goal or anyone really wants, but if it's your goal to have an unsatisfying marriage or family relations, then using contempt with your partner or other family members is certainly a way to reach that goal. So what is the antidote to contempt? It is treating one another with respect or building a culture of appreciation. So far we've talked about some of the antidotes to destructive behaviors for criticism, gentle startups, defensiveness, taking responsibility, and now with contempt, we're talking about building a culture of appreciation. I like the statement by Elder Marvin J. Ashton. He said, if we could just look into each other's hearts and understand the unique challenges each of us faces, I think we would treat each other much more gently, with more love, patience, tolerance, and care. Let us open our arms to each other, accept each other for who we are, assume everyone is doing the best he or she can, and look for ways to help leave quiet messages of love and encouragement instead of being destructive with bashing. So, how can we build that culture of respect or appreciation? One of Gottman's mottos is small things often. If you regularly express appreciation, gratitude, affection, and respect for your partner, you'll create a positive perspective in your relationship that acts as a buffer for negative feelings, and you're less likely to feel contempt. Another way to explain this is there is really a magic ratio of 5-to-1 positive to negative interactions in healthy and happy relationships. If you seek to have 5 or more sincere positive interactions for every one negative interaction, then it is like you're making regular deposits into your emotional bank account, which keeps your relationship with a positive balance. We don't want to find ourselves in relationship overdraft where we're overdrawn. Then there's little or no goodwill to draw upon when things don't go well. That's when problems seem overly difficult to manage and work through. So let me share with you an example of a marital partner seeking to address conflict while also building the emotional bank account. I understand that you've had a long day at work and appreciate how hard you work to support our family. But could you please spend more time with the children when you get home and help me get them ready for bed before you take time to relax? If we work together, then we can both have some time to relax, connect, and recharge for tomorrow. I'd really appreciate that. Now, this example works well because understanding is expressed right away. The desire to relax isn't wrong, as she asserts that she needs to relax too. It is a respectful request and ends with a statement of appreciation. It is a deposit in the emotional bank account. Now, let's look at the fourth destructive behavior, and that's stonewalling. And stonewalling occurs when one withdraws from the conversation without resolving anything. Many men and some women get agitated in discussion and so turn to stonewalling or shutting the other partner out to avoid saying or doing something they might regret, or to avoid getting an attacking response back. Ellie Letizia states that rather than confronting the issue, someone who is stonewalling will be totally unresponsive, making evasive maneuvers such as tuning out, turning away, acting busy, or engaging in obsessive behaviors. So what is the antidote to stonewalling? The antidote to stonewalling is physiological self-soothing. So when we, typically men are more likely to stonewall than women, but it can happen both ways. But when we get emotionally escalated, we're not thinking clearly. And we need to think clearly in order to problem solve together. And so what we can do is we can request a break from our partner. And we can say, right now I'm not going to say or do something that I think is going to be helpful. So would you mind if we took a break so I can just calm down? And a break needs to be at least 20 minutes, but sometimes it may need to be overnight. What you do during that break is really vitally important. Intuitively, it makes sense to go away and think about how you might better say what you need to say or argue your point with your partner, but the Gottmans suggest otherwise. Rather than coming up with a more persuasive argument during the break, the key is to engage in some action to self-soothe or to calm down your reactive brain. It's critical to avoid thoughts such as, well, I don't have to take this anymore, or why is he always picking on me, or why does she always do that? Rather, what is needed is to do something like go for a walk, listen to music, read a book, or do some deep breathing or progressive muscle relaxation exercises. These exercises physiologically calm the body and allow the mind to also return to a calm state. With a physiologically calm body, then you're better able to return to that same problem with a clear-minded perspective and use your communication skills to work things through. In marital counseling, I often say to people, you communicate very well to me and very respectfully. So I know that you have the skills to do that with your partner. It's just getting into the right frame of mind and building those healthy communication habits that with your loved ones so that these skills can work for you. Now, one last comment on this break, and it's important that when we ask for the break, that we agree with our partner that we will come back and we'll follow up on the thing that is of most concern. If you do that, then you're making sure to build trust in your relationship by coming back. So that's our first area that we're talking about in terms of building healthy and resilient relationships. Now let's talk about the second principle, and that's how to build and strengthen love. And I think in order to do that, we need to understand what love is. Hollywood and popular culture send a lot of confusing and a lot of less than real messages about relationships. So to start with, let's refer to some thoughts by Dr. M. Scott Peck about what love is and about how it's developed and how it's maintained. He says that love is as love does. Love is an act of will, namely both an intention and an action. Will also implies choice. We do not have to love. We choose to love. Genuine love is volitional rather than emotional. The person who truly loves does so because of a decision to love. The person has made a commitment to be loving, whether or not the loving feeling is present. Love is not effortless. To the contrary, love is effortful. He continues, no matter whom we fall in love with, we sooner or later fall out of love if the relationship continues long enough. This is not to say that we invariably cease loving the person with whom we fell in love, but it is to say that the feeling of ecstatic lovingness that characterizes the experience of falling in love always passes. The honeymoon period always ends, and the bloom of romance always fades. True love is not a feeling by which we are overwhelmed. It is a committed, thoughtful decision. Genuine love is volitional rather than emotional. The person who truly loves does so because of a decision to do so. So with helping us understand the importance of these concepts about love, the commitment is the thing that drives love through. Feelings come and go, but commitment is constant. And as we remain committed, then our relationship becomes more stable and our love actually deepens. And it's the type of love that allows for more trust and more stability within a relationship. It's more constant and more stable. So when we make a commitment to love one another, it's easy to understand that one of the best ways of building love is remembering this emotional bank account that we just talked about. It is through small and simple ways that you turn to your partner each day to listen, acknowledge, share your thoughts with them, serve them, show gratitude to them, share nurturing touches such as hugs, kisses, and gentle caresses. These are ways to build the emotional bank account and create greater love and intimacy in the relationship. At the same time, you're building up emotional safety and trust so that when something doesn't go so well in the relationship, the goodwill and trust that has been built up can be drawn upon. These emotional reserves are what sustain us during times of conflict, disagreement, and disappointment. So the concept is not only an antidote to contempt, as we discussed earlier, but it is a way to strengthen and build the relationship, remembering that, as Peck says, love is as love does. One of the fundamental building blocks of love is genuinely showing interest in and listening with empathy to those we love. All relationships are strengthened through taking time to call, talk, and especially listen to those we love. When I need to talk or get perspective, I'm so grateful for my wife, for my colleagues, for my friends, for family, who will listen to me and reflect back what I've said. I'm one who needs a good sounding board. I remember what a good example my father-in-law was in the way that he showed love to his widowed mother. He would call her every night just to chat and check in on how her day went and how she was doing. Now, let's go to the third and last principle of building relationships, and that is developing relationship resilience. And this involves making regular apologies and having regular forgiveness. It involves committing to the relationship and making efforts to maintain love. And it involves seeking a soft heart. I've noticed that relationships that thrive are those where people are quick to apologize and then forgive one another as well. I'm not saying that we shouldn't make our best efforts not to hurt our loved ones and those we associate with. But when we do hurt one another in small and sometimes bigger ways, a timely apology and opening our heart to forgive leads to resiliency in relationships. Apologizing when we are wrong is one of the keys to taking responsibility for our part in relationship conflict. When we do say things that hurt or neglect our partner or family members, our efforts to make amends or to try harder go a long way to restoring trust and caring. These kind of behaviors renew and refresh relationships. Relationships are more resilient where there's regular apologies. As I mentioned, a whole lot of forgiving is also present in resilient relationships and marriages. Relationships are challenging because there's two different people with oftentimes competing agendas that are challenging. In our efforts to get our needs met, we are sometimes insensitive and hurt one another. It's the willingness, though, to work through conflict together respectfully and to try to forgive the other when they're not acting like their best selves that creates resilient relationships and sustains commitment. Recall that Dr. Peck again stated that love is not effortless. To the contrary, love is effortful. And from my perspective, an important part of that work is the apologies and forgiveness that we extend to one another. Now, commitment is another essential component of resiliency. When we're committed, we may have problems arise in our relationships, and then our minds tend to go to, well, how can I resolve the problem? When we lack commitment to the relationship and don't have the promises and covenants that we made come into our mind, they can easily slip, allow us to slip into thinking that maybe my spouse is the wrong person for me. And I'm not saying that people need to stay in abusive relationships, or when a partner shows a pattern of infidelity, that people need to continue to stay in their marital commitment. They may choose to and try to work things through. But I am saying that strong commitment creates resilience and desire to keep on trying. Now, let me conclude by sharing an experience that was profound for me. Before I started my master's program at Brigham Young University, I decided that I was wanting to do something in the social sciences, but wasn't really sure what it is. I was maybe going to go to law school. I had a few things that I was thinking about, but I was interested in counseling, and so I thought I'd attend this lecture from a marriage and family therapist from BYU named Richard Chittister. And in his presentation on strengthening marriage and relationships, he made a statement that has always stuck with me. He stated that we can get the best counseling and learn all the requisite skills to have a successful relationship. But unless our heart is in the right place, we will struggle much more than we need to and may ultimately fail in our relationships. His point was that a soft heart that is open to our loved ones is essential to success in relationships. And then he said, if you don't develop that kind of a heart when you're prone to use relationship skills, then you probably will be manipulative or controlling, approaches that are sure to erode trust, love, and commitment. So even though you might learn all the skills, you might just use them in a way that isn't very genuine. So how do we develop a soft heart, referred to by Dr. Chittister? It is by using the spiritual helps that are available to us. As a believer in Jesus Christ, I recognize that he can help me develop and keep a soft heart. I can let go of a heart that is at war. I can let go of a blaming disposition and develop a loving, patient, understanding, accepting heart. This is the gift that Jesus gave us through his example. And it's an active gift that is available to us through prayer if we'll ask for it. Remember, that Jesus Christ said in Matthew 11:28 through 30, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly of heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." In the Book of Mormon, in the Book of Alma, 20 verse 4, it reads, "In the strength of the Lord thou canst do all things." And in Philippians, in the New Testament, chapter 4, verse 13, it says that I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. So we must ask the Lord in faith for a soft heart, and then seek to live in a way that keeps it soft. We can recognize that when we start to harden our hearts towards those we love, the Lord can give us the strength to soften our hearts. We can also study and seek to apply characteristics described in the Beatitudes that the Savior taught us about through the Sermon on the Mount, including being peacemakers, comforting and serving others, seeking to be good, showing mercy to others and ourselves, being meek, which I believe is a combination of humility and confidence, and repenting when we do something wrong. I encourage you to prepare your heart and continue to learn about and seek to apply some of the skills that we've discussed today so that you can have the relationships that you deserve and desire. I hope you found my presentation helpful as I've enjoyed preparing it for you. I want to close with this last thought. It's from Thomas S. Monson, a previous president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I think this statement summarizes some of the important points that I've made today. Choose your love and love your choice. Thank you very much, and I'll send it back to you, Scott.
Well, thank you very much, Brad. Bishop Harker. I think I speak for everybody who's watching that we learned a lot tonight and really appreciate you spending some time with us. There were a few questions that if you have just a moment, I'd like to ask a couple of the questions.
Sure.
Someone asked, what are some good self-help books if I wanted to learn more about these ideas you've presented and strengthen my marriage?
Yeah, so obviously the Gottman Institute website is a good resource. There's also a book written by John Gottman called The 7 Principles of Making Marriage Work. So I would recommend that if you're wanting to, get some more details about some of those principles that I talked today regarding the 4 horsemen of the marital apocalypse. Also for marriage, there is a marital therapist and researcher named Sue Johnson, and she has pioneered an approach called emotionally focused therapy, and she's written a book called Love Sense, the New Revolutionary Science of Romantic Love, and she helps us understand about some attachment styles that help us understand why we might do some of the things we do in our relationships, and better help us to know what we can do to understand from our perspective our attachment styles, what we can do maybe differently, and then if we understand our partner's attachment style, then we can better understand how to meet their needs. So it's an interesting read, and I would recommend those books for strengthening and building love in your relationships.
Okay. Just 2 more questions here. One says, my spouse and I have considered marriage counseling. What recommendations do you have about who and what type of counselor we should arrange to see?
So I think if you can find a therapist who does emotionally focused therapy, maybe throws in some Gottman stuff. It's a really powerful and profound way of doing therapy, and it helps couples in ways that I think we've had a difficult time in the past getting to. And so I'm really a fan of that. So if you can find a therapist who does emotionally focused therapy, then that's what I would recommend. Whenever I'm suggesting or being asked about how to find a good counselor, I typically will say look for recommendations from people that you know and trust. And if you begin to find that maybe a name comes up more than once as someone who is effective, then that's a good recommendation. Um, the other thing that you can do is that you can make up a list of questions, and it's not so important what the questions are, but they can be things like what's your therapeutic approach, what's your experience, and do you typically find that you have a certain number of sessions? And these questions can help you get a feel for the therapist. And so by asking the therapist that you're kind of gathering information on these types of questions, then you can see if there's a comfort level already just by the way that they're responding to your questions and treating you. And that can be kind of an indication of what therapy might be like for you.
Okay, and one last question, kind of a sensitive question. Says, I lack the motivation to try in my relationships, and I just keep getting hurt over and over again. I feel like I just want to give up. Do you have any advice for me?
I think the first thing I'd say is to not give up hope. And one of the interesting bits of research by the Gottmans is they found that even with very troubled relationships, if people will just hang in there, uh, 5 to 10 years later, oftentimes they have a very satisfying relationship. And I thought about why that might be. And I think it's because as you hang in there, you're going to learn skills one way or the other to make your relationship work. So don't give up. Oftentimes we have a lot of things invested in our relationships, particularly children. And it's important that we not only try for the sake of ourselves and our partner and others, but we try for our children. I have a brother, and he's given me permission to share that he was divorced, and it's not been easy for him. And a lot of water is under the bridge. But he's thinking and said to me as I'm meeting with people, let them know that divorce is not an easy route, not the easy way. And so I think it's better in many cases to try to work things through. Now, I would suggest as well that if you're feeling this way, that you talk to a trusted advisor. So you might seek to talk to clergy or talk to a couple counselor, maybe visit with your doctor. Oftentimes for men, depression is masked by anger and workaholism. And so we obviously have to work hard to keep our jobs, but when it's work at the expense of everything else, or when we're angry all the time, that might be an indication of depression. Maybe a medical doctor could help you determine whether counseling might be helpful or whether some medication might be helpful. Antidepressant medication is not addicting, but can be helpful in terms of helping as a reset. So I would just reiterate, don't give up hope, reach out, know that whatever Jesus Christ lays his hands on, he can heal. And so he can help us with our small and our large problems.
Well, thank you very much. With that, we'll wrap up our second installment of Speaker Series, a monthly presentation series made by the Tuscany Ward of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is a bi-monthly series. Our next episode will likely be in January. We invite you to join us again in January. More information to follow on that. With that, I'll say goodbye. Brad, goodbye. And viewers, we'll see you.